This is Akashvani. In the program Spotlight, now we bring you a discussion on increasing participation of women in Indian Armed Forces and paramilitary forces. The participants are Major General Ashok Kumar, Defence Analyst, and Ajay Banerjee, Journalist.
The Ministry of Defence in the past 30 years has kept on adding women into various arms of the Indian Armed Forces, that is the Indian Army, Indian Air Force and the Indian Navy. Now recently these numbers have increased because the women were given permanent commissions and more number of women have opted to join the armed forces. Also, the Ministry of Defence has allowed women to join in the Agniveers, that is the non-officer cadre for the first time. The training for the non-officer cadre has started. Around 3-4 years ago, they took women in the military police in the non-officer ranks. Now, things are changing fast. Yesterday, the Defence Minister Rajnath Singh opened the first all-girls Sainik school. Now, Sainik schools, as we all know, are part of education curriculum across the country. When Mr. Rajnath Singh opened this school in Mathura, Uttar Pradesh, he also spoke about the opportunities the Ministry of Defence has given to the women in joining the forces. General Kumar, let's go into a bit of that how things started. 1992, we all remember the first women started coming in short service commissions and how things have gone on. Could you please tell our listeners how things have panned out in the past 30 years?
Ajay, I think, a brief background will add to the understanding much better. In fact, even in the World War II, the late stages, even Britishers, though they were open to the women in the defense forces, but that was only limited to the support role. However, as against this, the Azad Hind Force was the first organization related to India, wherein women were given the combat role as well in form of a Rani Jhansi regiment. Anyway, post-independence, the induction of women in the armed forces was quite restrictive. The options were available only in the military nursing services, Army Medical Corps and Army Dental Corps. As you have rightly brought out, the watershed moment came in 1992 when women started getting commissioned, of course only as a short service commission officers in that time. But in 2008, permanent commission was also granted in legal as well as in education corps. And another major milestone came in 2020, just about 3 years back, when they started getting commission in all the corps of the Indian Defence Forces, except combat arms, that is to say infantry, mechanized infantry and armored corps. This officer-centric induction of women also underwent a change, as you have briefly mentioned, and that happened in 2019, when Indian Army decided to recruit about 100 military police constables per year, and that has been continuing since then. The profile of short service commission officers again underwent a change, of course with the intervention of Supreme Court in 2022, when short service commission officers were now eligible for grant of permanent commission. Frankly speaking, the main shackles of women's entry in the armed forces have already been broken. As we are all aware that NDA, the most premier institution for all the three services, they commenced training of women cadets as early as since July 22. The first batch is already due to pass out in May 25. Of course, the first batch has a very limited number of cadets, that is 19 in all, but it is progressing with every passing year. You have also rightly brought out that women cadets started getting admission in Sainik schools, which are the premium institutions all over the country as a feeder institution for recruitment in the defense forces. Though the approval was given in way back in 2019, but the admission started in academic year 2021 in class 6, and these children now are in class 8 at the moment. You have also highlighted two important developments. That is, one is the all-girls Sainik school, Samvit Gurukulam Girls Sainik School, which was inaugurated by Honorable RM in Mathura, and already has a capacity of 870 students. And as this not to have been enough, the Agniveer scheme has opened to women candidates for the recruitment in Army, Navy and Air Force as well.
General Kumar, you have brought out very valid points that these schemes have opened. Sir, the number of women officers in the Army and the Navy and the Air Force collectively stand around 7,000, approximately 7,000 at the moment. The numbers keep changing, as we all know. And also, Agniveer, a woman's expected to come in. You have brought out, General Kumar, how women are in key arms at the moment. We have seen that the first woman got posted in the Siachen Glacier 6-8 months ago. The Navy has appointed a first woman who will command a ship. The Air Force has fighter pilots, women. All the two services, the Air Force has had the role to start off with women flying helicopters in the Indian Air Force. And these are key roles. The Navy has women on PA-type surveillance aircraft. The Coast Guard also has women pilots who fly Dorniers and also the helicopters. Sir, how do you see this as women opting to serve the nation and also as a kind of an opportunity for them to work in the strategic sector?
Ajay, I think this is a very, very important aspect. I have seen the girl cadets in National Cadet Corps very closely. The kind of dedication, devotion and the intellectual ability they possess, they really can't be matched by the men, if I have to be frank on that issue. In fact, there have been number of candidates which have cleared the direct entry commission barrier, and because of limited vacancies, only few got selected. In fact, the reject category of the women candidates had higher marks than those which were selected in the male category. That is the kind of the intellect difference which we have. Now when the country is, making rapid transformation on the world stage in each and every field, and majority of the fields the women have, already proved their mettle. I think, the country is already poised for utilizing their potential for its wholesome growth, and the defense forces, though slowly initially, but have also now realized that women are going to make a major contribution to the warfare method which is going to emerge in 21st century and beyond, especially on our borders. The kind of technology intensive equipment is coming. It requires more of automation, more related to cyber security, information warfare, and whole lot of things. And women are, in fact, in number of fields are more suited to men. And therefore, this focused approach on women's induction in the defense forces is going to be game changer to my mind.
Jan Kumar, you make a very valid point that even the women cadets who were rejected at the academies had greater marks or the higher marks than the male counterparts who were rejected or selected. General, you have also made a point that the women are more suited to certain roles. What are these roles? Can you please specify our listeners? Are they analytical roles? Are they kind of roles which the military needs more in terms of technology changes? What are these?
See, women were initially conceived to be better in the soft skills oriented method of war fighting, and they were considered to be less suitable for the combat roles, so to say. This perception has already resulted in infantry, mechanized infantry and armored corps not co-opting the women in their stream in the direct fighting because of, what will be the reasons. But warfare, the way it is changing, what we see in Russia and Ukraine, or we see in Hamas and Israel, or anywhere in the world, the war fighting methodology is, undergoing a change. So now long-range vector, long-range missiles, and these things can be operated from anywhere, and they don't require climbing on the mountains and elsewhere. So therefore, the war fighting which is coming to the fore, they can be handled by women more efficiently in an organized manner, and their perceived physical capacities are not a challenge at all. And this is a mindset, though it has already vanished to a long extent, but whatever be little remaining, even that has to vanish as early as possible.
To buttress General Kumar, I'll remind the listeners that there was a woman officer controlling the Indian fighter aircraft one day after the Balakot strikes in February 2019, when there was an air duel over Nowshera on the line of control with Pakistan. There was a woman officer who was coordinating the fight and the sequencing of the jets which were going to combat Pakistan Air Force. Jan Kumar, there is also talk in the Indian Navy woman who has just gone to command a warship. As I rightly pointed out, that there was a woman who has been posted to Siachen Glacier. Sir, there are still some fields, as you say, that are not open to women, infantry, mech infantry or the armored. Women have been demanding that they may be given combat roles in the army. Women have combat roles in the Indian Air Force and also partly in the Navy. You think the army will open these three separate roles for the women to be entering combat stream?
I think it will. More than that, I would say it should do it on its own as early as possible. Probably in the mind of the army thinkers, there is a thought that due to army's involvement in combat operations, as well as that in counterinsurgency, counter-terrorist operations, there may be adversarial conditions where the women can be subjected to the harsh handling by our opponents, and therefore there are certain reservations. But I think the way they have been inducted, you see, they are fighting hand to hand in Israel against the current operations in Hamas. They are fighting in US-led operations in multiple places in the country, and most of the countries in the world are allowing women the combat role. I think India has taken a little more time to open its shackles, and it is time that this role is allowed. Of course, it can be done initially on a pilot project basis, and based on the experience, the other larger role can continue to be given to them. Maybe a little sequential, but its time has already come, and this cannot be kept pending any longer if we are all concerned about the national good.
Jan Kumar, when you say these things, there is also an issue of what I also get to hear from senior defense officers, that it is also a cultural issue in our country. As you pointed out, in close combat areas, what if a woman officer faces hand-to-hand combat with the enemy or a terrorist? These things, cultural issues, you think they'll be bridged soon?
It will take little time because there are certain beliefs and way of living which are ingredient in our way of thinking in the defense forces, mainly amongst the mind of the soldiers, because a majority of them come from the rural backgrounds. But as you see and experience that some of the women officers who have been given commanding positions are doing the important assignments, at least in signal regiments, AD regiments, artillery regiments and elsewhere, the initial apprehension that the orders given by them are not going to be acceptable by the soldiers has actually been totally an empty hoax, and they are being accepted, and the acceptance is basically in today's time predominantly not only by the rank which you put on your shoulders, but by the intellect and commitment and compassion which you carry. I think there are certain apprehensions still continuing, I will not deny that, but majority of those shackles have already been broken, and we are going to change that totally in days to come.
Jan Kumar, these are words which have evolved over the past 30 years, this evolutionary process of bringing women into the armed forces. The next steps are very clear. Sainik schools, there were co-educational Sainik schools. Then the Defense Minister yesterday opened the first ever all-girls Sainik school. Sir, to explain to our listeners, how many percentage of people or girls or students or boys in Sainik school, they opt out to join NDA or take the NDA exam?
Well, when the induction of cadets started in NDA, as I highlighted in July 22, the training capacity 400 plus only 19 vacancies were given to the women cadets, and this is going to increase with every passing day. I think the defense forces are attempting to absorb and take the decision in a manner that it doesn't become counterproductive as per their perception. However, there are not a singular instance wherein induction of women in the armed forces have to be counterproductive to the organization's role. Though the vacancies have been opened in the Sainik schools, and now all girls Sainik school has also come up, and more will come up in due course of time. But every child from Sainik school, whether a male or a woman, doesn't get an entry into the defense forces because the vacancies are limited, but they will be able to get those options more openly and on a competitive basis. And besides, in the environment of getting trained, I think they will become good citizens irrespective of the field in which they get to work.
Jan Kumar, you made valid points. As we come to the close of this program, I must also remind the listeners there are around 30,000 women in the Central Armed Police Forces. The government has reserved certain number of posts for constable level in the CRPF, in the BSF, CISF, ITBP, SSB, and the Assam Rifles. The recruitment of border guarding forces means that these women are also patrolling the borders, the border fencing, and in the past couple of years, the women at the BSF also have prevented few intrusions along the Western Front. With these number of women joining the paramilitary forces and also defense forces, the matters look bright for women cadets in the defense services and the paramilitaries. Thank you for joining us, General Kumar.
Thank you very much.
You were listening to a discussion on increasing participation of women in Indian Armed Forces and paramilitary forces. The participants were Major General Ashok Kumar, Defense Analyst, and Ajay Banerjee, Journalist. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of Akashvani. You can listen to it on a mobile app, News on AIR. This program is also available on a YouTube channel, News on AIR Official. You may share your feedback about this program through email at airnsdtalks@gmail.com or WhatsApp on 9289 094044.